Hi my friend, in this video we're going to be mixing and mastering a disco house song inspired by David Penn and OFFAIAH's song, Satisfied. We're going to find out if we can do this in under 30 minutes by using the 80-20 rule of mixing and mastering disco house. What you're listening to right now is the song that we'll be working on. And what you're looking at right now is the Ableton project file that we'll be working on. In particular, what we're going to do is first go over the mix as you go process that I usually follow, so that as you're building up your tracks, you can make sure that they're sounding good and working really well with your track. We're also going to show you how to do reference mixing, so we're going to be flicking back and forth between a reference to make sure that you're building your track up to a professional quality standard. And then we'll also be doing some group processing as well as the mastering as well for this track before we wrap it all up. So with that said, make sure you stick around to the end of the video. We'll also be doing a full recap of the 80-20 rule for this, so that you can make sure that you're finishing songs faster than ever before and applying everything that you're learning here. And so make sure to stay to the end of that, because all in all, this did take only about 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes to mix and master, especially when you do stuff like mix as you go. The final mix and master can be done really quickly, really effectively. So excited to show you all that. And all in all, as we're zooming out here, you can see the song's been arranged, mixed, mastered, fully finished and ready to go. And that only took me about 5 or 6 hours to complete. So if finishing songs faster, just like that, is something you'd like help with, I've also made you a free bundle of templates, samples, and special bonuses that I use to completely finish one song like this every single week. Just visit the link that's on screen now or in the description to grab the ultimate song finishing toolkit for free. And if you want to take things to the next level, you can also find a link to this video's project files in the description as well. With that said, let's jump into this. All right. So let's jump into the mix and the master for this track. So one of the first things off the top I want to mention is it's important to have a reference track for the song you want to build up against. In your project file, what I like to do is turn it off like this and map it so that the S key, I can quickly flick between what we're working on and what the reference track is. This way you can do the main key here when it comes to the 80-20 rule, mixing, mastering, stuff like this, is flicking back and forth so you can set the volumes right. Focusing on the volumes is going to be the fastest, quickest way that you can make things sound really professional, because you're comparing your volumes against a really high quality track, ideally. So with that said, the kind of process that I want to kind of go over is, what I usually do first is as I'm building up the track, I'm mixing as I go. And so there's a particular way that I do this that I want to highlight. And if you watch the other videos in this series and other videos on the channel, then you have an idea what this is. But the main idea here is really about setting up kind of channel strips that I want to show you. So usually what I have is this channel strip here, and every track that I add, audio track, MIDI track, usually has this channel strip. And so the idea is for each track, as you're introducing a new element, what you want to do is quickly adjust the EQ. And the main EQ adjustment you want to do is removing the low end, because this can be a quick way to make sure that the low end is saved and preserved, so that the kick and the bass is the main element that's taking up the low end. So a quick thing you can do is I set up this channel strip so that it's automatically set to be cutting out 200 Hertz. So almost always right away, whenever I add a new track, it's already has this cut, and I can just come in here and adjust it if it's needed to be adjusted. The next thing I like to do is sometimes do a high shelf, and this can be a nice way to help mix the song in, so it's maybe the highs aren't cutting through as much, and you can mix the element into your track a bit more. Then I might do some transient shaping. So what this is here is the free colorist transient shaper. What I've just done is set it up in a drum rack so that I can quickly adjust the attack and sustain. So what this is the transients of the sound. So something that I'll normally do is pull back the sustain, which will tighten up the sound a bit. And when your sounds are a bit tighter, it's going to sound a little bit more cohesive and professional, in my opinion. So playing with that's important. Then the next thing I'll usually do is run things into this little rack I made, where it's a 1-knob sidechain and a 1-knob saturation. The sidechain is right here. It's just a shaper in a LFO tool looking shape, running to a quarter note, which is what the kick is usually playing, and it's just ducking volume on the utility. And that way you can just quickly with one knob add in some simple sidechain, dialing it in mostly by ear, which I think is important. Same thing with the saturation. This is just Ableton Saturator right here. And the idea is you can introduce saturation to fill out the sound a little bit as you're working with the track. So instead of always moving towards the volume, you can also create some body and some texture and some fullness by adding in saturation. And then the last thing usually in this chain here is this width plugin, which is a free plugin as well, Polyverse Wider. I've just mapped everything to some Ableton rack knobs so that it's just like with one knob, can push things to the left and right, make it more stereo, which is important. And also, again, making sure that, say, things like vocals or any main lead lines and some drum sounds like the kick are in the center, and when you push things left and right, it's making so the stuff in the center is less, it's not competing with as much because you're moving things within the panorama. So these are some small changes that I'll usually do very quickly as I'm building each track. So I can just quickly go through this. With the kick, something that I usually do is just don't even add any kind of low cut. There's something I heard about how there could be like phasing issues and stuff like that, and it also just makes it easier for me. Just like the kick drops in, I'm not playing with that low end anymore. I just choose the right sample, set the right volume, and don't tweak too many crazy things. And that's really the main idea. So as you introduce a track, compare it back and forth. Say we're listening to the kick. Listen to the kick, how yours sounds compared to it. Pick the right sound, set the right level, and that's really going to be the main thing. Then as you're going through it, you can do small tweaks like just getting rid of some of the low end, tightening things up with some transient shaping, making sure there's some kind of one knob side chain, or however you want to do the side chain, so there's some pumping, that cool dance effect. And it's making room for the kick and the bass, some saturation to fill out the sound optionally, and some width if you want to adjust the width. But again, the main thing is selecting the right sounds and selecting the right volumes. So if you want to have a more of a deep dive into how I was building each one of these tracks, let's add some more volume, some interest here. Definitely check out the other videos in the series. I go over each of the drums one by one, each of the bass one by one, each of the melodic stuff by one. And you can kind of see that mix as you go process. The only other thing I think I want to go over in this video would be maybe mixing the bass. So when it comes to the bass, one thing that I like to do is have two tracks. One is for the subs and one is for the bass. There's a couple of reasons. One is when you're writing tracks, when it's just a sub, it's similar to writing to, if you're using a piano or like a guitar, you're focusing on a very, very, very neutral tone, not a lot of sound design going on, so you can focus on getting the notes right. In addition to that, when you have two tracks like this, you can make sure that the sub is the element that's taking care of the low end. So if you ever feel like the song isn't sounding full enough, you can just adjust this track, increase the volume without screwing up any of the tone of the bass or anything like that. Similarly, by having like, so the mid bass sound, so in this case, and usually what I like is this cool like bass guitar sound. But that way, this second bass track is, its focus is on the character and the vibe and like the grit of the tune. And you can make adjustments to this mid bass layer, but just cut out a bunch of the lows, as you can see here, and then you're just focusing on the character of it. And like, say if you do some sound design trick and then it destroys your low end, that's not a problem because another track is taking care of that low end. So that's another one I mentioned there. If you want to learn more about this, definitely check out the bass video for this track. And then other than that, same thing, going through, adding each track, setting the volumes, comparing it to the reference track, and doing small changes to the channel strip stuff. Very, very, very small changes. No like crazy EQ cuts or anything too insane like that. Last thing I want to go over, mixing. Once I've done the mix as you go, build out the process like this. Sometimes what I will do next is do some group or bus processing. So if we start over with the drums, on the group here, what we have is I'm running into a K clip right off the top. And this is mainly going for about a decibel of clip, and it's also trying to control the volume. So I have the in and the out linked so that when I could pull this back so it's not going too crazy. Because when I'm mixing, what I usually do is, you can see here the reference track is set to 0. So I'm actually mixing everything to 0 instead of like ducking everything down 6 decibels and then trying to bring it back up in mastering. kind of how I've been doing it, and I've been pretty happy with the results, and it's just simple and it just works. But then you do need to make sure that you have some contingency, and I think a good way to do that is with clipping, to make sure that things aren't going above 0 and getting all distorted and sounding like crap. So that's an important thing. Then other than that, it's just a little bit of some bus processing here. So running into this punch and parallel preset. This is a technique called New York compression or parallel compression. And the idea is, you can see here, this is slamming. So we have like 5 to 10 decibels of gain reduction with some pretty intense settings. And the idea is, the main thing is it's just being dialed in a bit. So it's adding some fullness to the sound in a subtle way, because we're just dialing in the dry and wet knob here. Then similar idea, we're going into a saturator and pulling back the dry and wet knob, so it's adding in a bit of saturation. And the idea is, by running through all the drums through a similar compressor and saturator, it's going to kind of tighten up the sound a bit and add some kind of cohesion, because everything's having the same processing being applied to it, which is super cool. And then lastly, going through another K clip here, going for less than a decibel clipped. We're already doing quite a bit there. Just trying to control the volume, make sure it doesn't go above 0 after all the processing we did. Next up is the processing on the bass. So these are all off, so we'll just scoot over to what's on. Very similar moves. As you can see here, what we're doing is starting off by going into a K clip, going for under a decibel clipped here with the linked function, so that as I was setting the volumes for the bass, this is going to make sure, even though I'm bringing it down 3 decibels, 3.5 decibels, it's automatically bringing up 3.5 decibels. So all those volume changes of mixing against the reference track are going to be preserved, and you're not going to be adding in too much volume or taking away too much volume as you do additional mixing steps like this. We're going to adjust the microphone. Hopefully that wasn't too quiet for that whole stretch of time. But with that said, then what we're running into here is this bass punch again thing. So we're doing some New York style compression, dialing it in with the dry and wet. Same thing with the saturation. We're dialing that in, just a bit of taste, getting everything to run through the same thing, adding that cohesion, kind of controlling the dynamics of the tracks a bit as well. And then a last K clip, just to make sure that we're not going above 0, and we're just kind of clipping some of the signal, which is going to help in the mastering stage, because we're not doing too much limiting or clipping. It's all about small changes over time, making sure each plugin isn't doing too much heavy lifting. Then last but not least, same stuff going on the melodic elements. A little bit of a different bit of processing going here. We're doing that New York style parallel compression, also running it into some OTT. OTT can really bring out kind of some like energy and like high end and make everything sound a bit more present, but it's also important to dial it in at a smaller level, so just about 10% here. And also the high's been controlled a little bit, because OTT could add quite a bit of too much high end, I would say. And then similar thing, saturation, we're running everything through the same saturator, and then into a K clip, looking for about a decibel or so of gain reduction on all that. And then all the effects are running into just a K clip, so I could bring it up and get a bit of clipping on that as well. So everything is being clipped a little bit, so that when we go into the final mastering stage, which is right here, all the mastering is simple. It's not going to be each plugin is not going to be working as hard, which is really important. So let's do a quick run through of the mastering. I'm using a MacBook Air, so this might get a little hairy, so I'm going to try to turn everything on in a sequence, and I might have to turn some stuff off if it's starting to destroy the computer. But generally the first thing I do is, so let's turn this on. You'll notice right away there was a decrease in the volume. One of the big things here is this compressor. So one of the first things is to run the mastering, in my opinion, of course with all this I guess, is to run it into a bit of compression, just lightly going for about like almost a decibel of compression, just to like lightly control the signal a little bit, make things a little bit more smoother, and what we're looking for is really just a very small amount of compression being applied here, so about a decibel. Since I mix to like 0 all the time, I find that if I didn't have this utility on at the beginning, it'd be like 2 or 3 decibels of compression, which I feel is a bit too much. And this is with the threshold at 0, so there's nowhere for me to go here. So what I like to do is just have a utility on here, so I can use this utility to bring down the volume, so I'm getting the right amount of gain reduction. In addition to that, on this compressor, we are setting it up so that it's not, it's skipping basically the kick drum. So we have this like little like low pass. It's not low passing the signal, it's just adjusting how the compressor is reacting. So by bringing this up, the kick is impacting the compressor a little bit less, and that way we're not getting as much kind of like weird, crappy pumping sounds basically. Next thing that I usually do is I add in this Golf Bus Master. So this is like kind of an AI EQ plugin. Very subtle settings, around 11 to 15% for recover. Same thing for the tame. Usually dropping down the brighten a bit and then bringing back this kind of low pass. So that way, this can add a bit of like too much high end, I find. But again, this is a really subtle plugin, I would say. If I turn it off and on, it's very subtle what it's doing, but I find it can help kind of fix any mistakes that you might have made in the mixing process and just kind of make things a little bit more stable. Then we're going to get into the final bit of like loudness. So this is a technique I learned from my buddy Zach Adams. So first thing is running into the first limiter. What we're looking for is about a decibel of gain reduction here with true peak limiting off and the transparent, set it on the transparent style. And then as well as on the output going -1 decibel. So the idea is small moves, each plugin's not working too crazy, so we're getting about a decibel of gain reduction, and we're hovering around a -11 lufs. We're looking at the short-term lufs is what we want to look at here. So let's move on to the next step, which is running it into a K clip. So again, we're looking for about a decibel clipped, and we'll also have the ceiling set to -1, so it's bringing everything down by 1. And this is going to cut off some of the transients off the top, which is going to give us a bit of headroom here. And then into the last limiter, where we're once again looking for about a decibel of gain reduction. This time, it's good to switch between modern or aggressive in terms of the limiting style, with true peak on this one, and the output at about -2, 0.2 or 0.3. And so by adding this all together, we're looking at about -8.5 lufs, which is pretty good. I'm usually looking for between -7, -8, -9 is usually pretty good. It could get pushed more, but this is a nice way where things aren't too crispy and sounding too crappy. And also, cool, the MacBook Air is holding off nicely. Let me just turn on the last bit of vocal too and show you some of how that processing is reacting, because we do have this off. And let's have a look. Boom. So that's a look at the mixing and mastering. I'm glad my computer is not exploding, but hopefully it didn't bring the volume up too much or anything. Yeah, that's a look at that. One thing I want to mention before we jump into the 80-20 rule here is this video is sponsored by our good friends over at Rocket Powered Sounds. The kick, snare, and clap samples that you heard in this project file was actually from their Ultimate Sample Pack, which is a massive sample pack filled with over 1,000 usable and iconic sounds. And as a special bonus, you can get 30% off of that Ultimate Sample Pack. Just visit the link on screen now or in the description, and be sure to use the coupon code ULTIMATEBESTFRIENDS to get 30% off. Thank you again to Rocket Powered Sounds for hooking up our community here, and let's jump back into the 80-20 rule for this vid. Hi my friend, Matt for Best Friends Club here, and if you've been paying attention, then you've probably figured out what the 80-20 rule is. Now the goal here is to get 80% of the result with only 20% of the time, energy, and effort. And because the first key to the 80-20 rule of arrangement is to use a reference track, we're making sure that we're effortlessly hitting 80% of a track that's been professionally arranged. In particular, we use that reference track to focus on the bigger macro transitions so that we can arrange our songs horizontally very quickly. However, we do need to make sure that we follow the 3-step process by first choosing the reference track, and then following it to build out our loop vertically. This way that when we start to build things out horizontally, we have plenty of layers to work with when we're arranging. The second key is to create an arrangement track with empty MIDI clips, so we have a visual guide that we can quickly glance at to make fast and proven song finishing decisions. The third and final key is to quickly and easily make sure your songs stay interesting over time and have a fantastic flow, by saving a library of templates, effects, and other sounds that can be used as micro transitions. If you'd like to get a head start by downloading all the racks, templates, and all the files that you've seen me use in the Ableton project file for this video, Or if you'd just like to take a closer look at any of the techniques or tracks you saw me work on in this video at your own pace, you can find a link to this video's project files on screen now and at the second link that's in the YouTube description. I'm recreating a different song from the Beatport top charts every single week and making the project files available to anyone who wants them. You'll also get access to a private Discord where you can ask me and the community questions, as well as share tracks for feedback. If you or your music are not quite ready for a shot in the arm like that, I've also made you a completely free bundle of templates, samples, and special bonuses that have helped me figure out how to completely finish one new song each and every single week. And you can grab that free Ultimate Song Finishing Toolkit by visiting the first link that's in the YouTube description here.